stuff. I better get moving. Okay, I want to start by saying that, start by saying Kura, hello, and thank you to Say for organising this. This is fantastic to see so many people in the room. I want to start by saying that the use of the word allies there is a little bit cheeky. I think if some of the corporations I'm about to speak about today ever heard me describe us as their ally, they would probably be appalled and probably ring their lawyers because they would be not happy with the use of that word. They're really external stakeholders with whom we have managed to define some common areas of interest and objectives, but of course I was never going to fit that on a slide, so I've used the word allies. So let's get moving. I want to tell this story through the lens of our wildlife entertainment campaign. Wildlife entertainment is one of the main ways in which wildlife is exploited on this planet. It's a campaign that we've been running for about 20 years. Thousands of animals, big charismatic species all the way down to sort of meerkats and the like, are exploited, they're ridden, they're made to perform in shows, they're treated in ways which are horrific, and of course, most fundamentally, they endure a lifetime in captivity, and they're wild animals that should never be kept in an environment like that. Our mission is to try to stop that happening, to try to stop the cruel training involved in training an elephant to allow it to be ridden, to stop the cruelty of keeping big tigers in small cages so that they can have selfies and the like. How do we do that? Let's start with the wins. We just this year, an elephant riding ban in Indonesia, which enforced. That's quite something. When I talk about these wins, obviously these are our wins, not just I'm claiming these for World Animal Protection. Many groups in Indonesia and elsewhere worked on these campaigns, and always, some of them not in this room, these are our wins. We also banned dolphin breeding in New South Wales a few years ago, and we worked with a number of travel companies to become wildlife friendly. We pushed on. Obviously, Aotearoa, a lot of wildlife, and it's not a big country in terms of wildlife tourism, but you do have things like Arana Park, clearly not one of the worst, and of course New Zealanders do tend to go overseas. You come to Queensland, you cuddle like koalas, you go to Thailand, you ride their elephants, you engage in practices which continues to create demand for these cruel practices. So it is an issue in New Zealand. What are we doing about it? So I'm going to I don't know who that is, but the young person at my work who put this slide together said, if you use that image, you will appear cool. Right. And I said to her, I suspect that's not correct, but let's go. This picks up on Deborah's point. We're not here to just sort of make things a little bit better. Bugger that. Too many animals are suffering for that. We need to change the system. Our organisation a few years ago explicitly decided that that's what we're here about. We want to bust up systems that exploit animals and treat them poorly. We, as much as possible, want to create a world where animals are simply not exploited for profit. That's what we want to do. How do we do it? Okay, this is the bit I wanted to talk about today. In saying that, which feels like reasonably a radical proposition to put forward, that we would have a world where animals are not exploited for profit for human use, we actually engage in practices which I think in some cases the movement finds sometimes a bit uncomfortable, and that is we actually work with organisations like zoos and wildlife entertainment venues. And we do that because we have found that we can actually identify common objectives with them which actually lead to benefit for animals. Part of systems thinking is really embracing and acknowledging complexity, and that includes the complexity of the organisations that we are frequently targeting. So for example, a zoo is not a zoo, it's not a monolithic entity. Like anything else, it's a collection of different people, different motivations, different agendas. And what we find is that if we can identify allies, the progressives within those institutions who share our vision of what the world should be for animals, and work with them and empower them within those institutions, we can actually achieve our goals. Does that say you might be a bit sceptical about the idea that there'd be anyone at a zoo who cares about animals? 2 years ago, I was in Christchurch at the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and we had a little kind of Chatham House session. They all turned up, all the zoos, all the wildlife entertainment venues. I said, all right, I'll throw a challenge out to you. I reckon in our lifetimes, zoos as they currently exist won't exist anymore. There might be an institution called a zoo. You'll have a really small number of animals, but only animals that are there for a conservation breeding purpose. And the response to that group was completely agreed. Just completely agree. Absolutely. A lot of zoos, the progressives in the zoos, completely agree with that. So to be clear, a lot of them came up to me afterwards and said, but please don't tell my marketing department that I said that. I get that. Part of that also, how much time have I got? 4? I'm going to even speak faster. Part of that is also acknowledging something that I think sometimes we're all a bit uncomfortable about doing, and that is being really upfront about our strategies and really open about them. I think sometimes, in my experience working for Greenpeace, working for other organisations, strategy is a kind of secret document that we keep in a box and there's a special key and we don't let anyone know what it is. We have a completely opposite approach. We actually want people to know what our strategy is. Firstly, because we want the progressives in the organisations we're targeting to be confident that they know what we're doing, right? So they won't get caught out, that we're going to not say, we want this, and then we're going to move the goalpost when they give us that. Second is, we feel like our strategies are really good, and we want everyone to know what they are, because we're hoping that the kind of organisations and companies and venues that we're targeting have a look at our strategy and our description of the world and how we will change it, and they say, yeah, we think you're probably right. So we're actually prepared to work with you, we're prepared to respond to you, and probably start to do some of the first steps you're talking about. Super quick, how is this working practice? I'm going to skip over that slide. Dolphin Marine Conservation Park. It's a little park, central coast of New South Wales, one of the worst wildlife entertainment venues in Australia. It is crappy. The first time I walked in there, I literally nearly vomited in my mouth. You have 4, currently only 3, beautiful dolphins in glorified backyard pools. They have been there for their entire life, these poor animals. There are other animals there as well. However, new management a few years ago turned around to us and said, we agree with you that this just isn't working anymore. We can't make this business work. Okay, now to be clear, their motivation was protecting the profitability of the park. Ours was to shut it down, or at least to shut it down as an entertainment venue. But by working with them, we had 2 good outcomes. The first is, they said publicly what we have been saying as well. They said, look, this kind of park just doesn't work anymore. People are just not coming in the doors. Community attitudes have shifted. No one wants to do this. We have no social license. They also instituted a breeding ban on dolphins in 2021, which the New South Wales government legislated, and that was a fantastic outcome. Time check? Okay, these Zoo and Zoos Associations, I want to go back to the Indonesian breeding ban. That came about because we had a conversation with some of the accreditors, WASA and the others. Generally, we're pretty skeptical about the accreditation agencies, as you are too. They generally kind of have good sounding standards and practices, and they give you a little badge so that people feel better about going to venues that abuse animals, right? But what we said to them was, all right, we're never going to agree on everything, but surely the one thing we can agree on is that if you're actually claiming to be improving animal welfare standards, you can't really accredit venues that allow elephant riding. And the progressives within the organisation said to us, well, actually that's an argument we've been having for a few years now. Our response is, we're about to put out a report and launch a campaign against you. We actually weren't, we just threatened it. And to do this, and we're going to call you out, embarrass you, and damage your reputation. They empower the progressives in there to get SIAZA, the Southeast Asian Zoo Association, to enforce its elephant riding ban policy, which then led to a whole bunch of venues to stop elephant riding and created the space for the Indonesian government to introduce the final ban that they did, which was a great outcome. I've run out of time, haven't I? Shame. Can I say one last thing? Absolutely. I did want to segue to one last thing at the end. This is very much for the small groups of the room. While we work with some unlikely allies, they're not allowed to be called allies, we also work with traditional allies. We all believe these things. But one thing I really want to call out, as a big group, we really feel that we don't just want to work with you and work with other allies in the movement, but we actually want to support you financially and otherwise. We host people in our office, we provide financial support to smaller organisations. And I think for the smaller organisations in this room, the bigger ones, we think that's an absolutely critical component of how we win as a movement, as a sector. Big groups like ours have a lot to offer, but one of the things we do have to offer is money. We can provide you with smaller amounts of money, which make you more effective and make the broader movement more effective. So I really think that anyone in this room who runs a small organisation, a small charity, a small movement, you should feel completely confident going up to some of the big